no matter how many people, for 25 hours, that was just one season. That's why I use so many words.
Hello, hello, hello. Good evening. Thank you for coming this evening. The sunny weather was brought by Zach. He brought the sunny weather today.
I tried. After the storms this morning.
Okay, let's go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. We're going to have a raffle shortly. We have 4 gifts, and believe it or not, guess what they're related to? Weather radios, but they're very good. And that everybody get a ticket. Anybody not get a ticket?
Coming.
Just as a reminder, I'll introduce Zach, and we'll go ahead, and I think Brian's got a couple of announcements. But Zach Covey is from Channel 13 Weather News in Orlando. He comes from a military background, Army. Yay!
Go Army! Go Army!
And he's traveled quite a bit around the world, and I think his travels also influenced him to get into the meteorology area. Now, there's one thing you cannot mention anything from a school in Gainesville. All right? Don't even think about it. Don't even do this.
No, we can't do this?
He is a Florida State graduate.
Oh, he's a Seminole.
Now, fortunately for me, his parents are from Arkansas. And so if it's not the Florida State University, it's the Arkansas Razorbacks. So just let everybody know about that. Brian, you got a couple of announcements?
Sure. Hey, everybody. That's weak. Try that again. Hello, everybody. Hello. That's better. You need to give that also to Zach when he does this. So, thanks, everybody, for coming out. I do see some folks who may be from different communities here. Raise your hands if you're from somewhere else. Yay. Thank you for coming. Where are you visiting from? We, next door neighbors. Thank you guys for coming by. We are neighbor to neighbor, and part of our function is also hurricane and disaster preparedness. And so, yeah, we're into hurricane season. You know, it started June 1st. It'll run through November 30th. And our club for the hurricane preparedness, for those of you who are not block captains, medical, or radio communications, in fact, those folks, raise your hands. All the medical, all the block captains, all the communication people, yeah. These people, we're dedicated to trying to help if we get hit by some sort of disaster, such as we get a pretty strong near miss, or maybe the eye of the storm runs right over us. The destruction that could ensue with that, tornadoes are also a possibility, especially the front right quadrant of a hurricane. It can spin off tornadoes. And with El Nino, Zach may correct me on this, maybe not. With El Nino, it tends to create shear winds in the upper atmosphere, which cuts the top of the hurricanes off. So that's why we may have a reduced number of hurricanes for this season in compared to, let's say, the last 2-3 years. But with those El Nino and the shear action, it can kick off tornadoes a little more than what might have naturally occurred. And again, Zach, you may correct me on that. Okay. Thank you so far. All right. We are in need of volunteers, folks. This is a 1,000 home community. We only have probably about half the number of people we really need, and we've had several people who have dropped out. So our numbers are dwindling, yet the number of residents consistently sticks around, 1,200, 1,500 people in the community who, if they get whacked by, devastating weather event, sure would like to see our smiling faces checking on them as a welfare check and a triage, because there could be medical issues associated with roofs being possibly torn off or something worse, trees coming through house, windows, hitting people, shards of glass, whatever. With us going door to door after the event has occurred, we may be the only lifeline they've got, and our cell phone service and our landlines may be down. There might not be any power. So we are prepared to deal with those. We have ham radio communications directly with Lake County Office of Emergency Management to kind of expedite first responders to us when there's no other way to get in touch with them. We are probably heads and shoulders above most communities, from my understanding from the Lake County officials. We're heads and shoulders above the other communities because we do have this organized effort to try to help. While we may not be able to successfully help everybody, with only half the people that we need, we sure could use some more. So if you're not already part of Neighbor to Neighbor as a block captain, as a medical team member, as a radio communications member, please stop and see Larry or myself. We would love to welcome you on board. Gary Nygren, are you here? Gary just recently came on you're doing the medical team, is that correct? Yes. Okay, I owe you an operations manual. Don't let me get away without getting it to you. We appreciate you. We are in sore need of medical people. Those numbers have dwindled somewhat than what we had before. So my plea goes out to our entire community. If you are civic-minded at all, and if you care about your neighbors, you care about your friends, maybe about yourself, because it could be another block captain's banging on your door trying to find out if you're okay inside that house. So we sure could use you. I think that's about it. If you take a look at these, take these home with you guys. This is a good checklist of all the things to do before, during, and after, including pet shelters, evacuations. The whole thing is in this pamphlet. It's a pretty good, concise pamphlet. I highly recommend you kind of take it to heart. Thank you, everybody. Larry.
We give the maximum time to Zach, but I'll go ahead and just do the raffles again. These are for weather radios, and they've been tested, and so anyway, they're very functional. And I'm going to have you.
Drum roll, please.
All right, 905-0190. There you go.
All right.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Go get it.
All right, 905-0191.
Here we go.
What are the odds? All right, let's go farther down. There we go. All right, 905-0192. What are the odds? No, three of them have been in a row. 909192.
It's rigged. It's rigged.
Who is 93?
Way to go. Yeah, yeah.
One more.
All right, let's see, let's break it. It's different.
Yay!
Sorry, 9-3. 9050167.
All right.
Got lighted too, so. Okay, one other thing, got a couple of things for Zach. I look at clouds and I know things.
I'm going to wear this on air, Mike. Just right over my suit.
I dare you to.
It's also going to be the last time you'll see me on air. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, we got some new technology, and this has been patented, and it may put you out of business, Zach, but the accuracy is on it. So anyway, you ever seen one of these? All right. Is it going to rain this week? You can count on it.
It's Florida summer season, yeah.
Okay. Okay, will Ed Giovanni grow more hair this year? Says absolutely, man.
Thank you so much, guys. Seriously. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that. Next time I have viewer questions that ask me what the weather is, this is the answer. This is the email back.
And this is a little more serious gift, but it's a pin and monogram. So hope you enjoy that.
This way nobody will take it on you.
Thank you, guys. Seriously.
And one
thank
more,
you.
and this is based on recommendation from John and Ed, which we're going to be going to this week, Delmonico's Italian Steakhouse.
Wow.
John, give me a word about it.
It's probably the best steak in Orlando.
Okay.
Not counting Ruth's Chris, but it's about half the price.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Seriously, I take this as an honor and a privilege. Thank you. Okay. Move this real quick. Here we go. All right, you guys can hear me?
Yes.
All right. So, my name is Zach Covey. Thank you so much for having me out. I honestly really do love doing these things. I do lots of school talks during the school year, but during hurricane season, especially during the summertime, I love coming out and talking to communities, different events, hurricane expos. I am a tropical specialist, and so hurricanes are my thing. So I hope to, impart a little knowledge today on the hurricanes and hurricane season. Before we get into my presentation, I want to talk about a couple of things, and then we'll dive into the presentation. How many of you are Spectrum customers, out of curiosity? Anybody?
Yeah, we don't get
Ooh,
Spectrum in here.
Okay, no Spectrum here. Well, don't worry, because I've got you covered. You can still get our weather forecast on the app, as well as our website, mynews13.com. So you don't have to be a Spectrum customer to get the latest weather forecast and to actually get a lot of the information and news that we put out there on the daily basis. A lot of people think you have to be Spectrum, you have to have internet or cable. That's not the case. So you can always access our information on mynews13.com, and then my social channels, which I'll give you at the end, and even on the Spectrum News app, which you can download in the App Store or Google Play. It is completely free. With that being said, I also want to talk about this little thing. We have something out in the Atlantic right now. Who knew about that today? Okay, few hands, that's good. So this is an area of investigation. It is not a tropical system yet. It is an area that could develop down the line. This is mainly in the central Atlantic right now. This system is an actual area of low pressure. You can kind of see that swirl. It's a very open and defined swirl. When we talk tropical systems, we typically can't see the center of circulation. This is very bare. So it's not actually fully defined. In fact, it's an area of low pressure that's coming off of New York right now, and it still has a cold front and a stationary front and a warm front with it. So it's not tropical. Tropical systems don't have fronts. So what this system needs to do is lose the fronts, and we suspect that's going to happen later this week. Once it loses the fronts, it could begin to gain some tropical characteristics. Plus, it's in a fairly moist environment. You can see all of this white cloud cover down here. This is a water vapor in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. Meanwhile, a digging trough is forcing this system farther south. So as it works its way into the central Atlantic, it's moving into more water vapor right now. It's not a dry air mass. There's not a lot of wind shear. So it is a somewhat favorable environment. This is something that you guys probably don't see on the daily, especially on TV. This is a computer model. This is something that I actually look at on the daily, and I break it down and I bring it back to layman's terms for each of you. But I figured since I have a little extra time, I could do it live for you guys, show you where this system's going. So we have an area of high pressure in the central Atlantic right now. And there's that digging trough coming on down. This is a kind of large upper level high back out through portions of northern Canada. This system, you're going to see, will spin up right there in the central Atlantic. It loses the fronts. You get those really bright colors indicating tight areas of spin. So we do have fairly good agreement that the system is going to develop at least a little bit of tropical characteristics. But the good news is, as I move it out into time, look what happens. A new ridge of high pressure builds to the south, and it forces it away from the United States. So regardless of development, regardless of what you may hear on TV, this is not coming to the US, this is not coming to Florida. It does not matter outside of maybe adding a number to the total systems count by the end of the year. So this is not going to be something that you necessarily need to worry about. Models are all over the place with it right now, but generally it's keeping it below tropical storm strength. So again, this is not going to be a major deal. We don't need to worry about it. So if you hear people hyping it up, something's in the Atlantic, I'll tell you if it's coming this way, it's not. So no need to worry or fret. I did want to kind of touch on that first and foremost. All right. So my presentation is called Being Prepared 2023, Storm Season 2023. That's the Spectrum News brand for this year. We want you at Spectrum News to be prepared. No matter where you live, no matter the community, you guys seem very, very well prepared. I'm going to tell you, I've done several community talks, and it seems like you guys have it down. You know what you need, you know how to communicate if something were to happen, and that is great. That is what we hope to really inspire other communities to do as well. So a lot of this information I'll go over today, you guys may say, yeah, we've got that. We're down. We know what we're doing. That's good. And I love to be able to spread a little more info with you. So who am I? You heard a little bit about it. I'm meteorologist Zach Covey. I went to Florida State, go Noles, class of 2016. I specialize in hurricane forecasting, and so while at Florida State, I studied hurricanes. I studied under some of the top tropical minds in the nation. Several Florida State grads have led the National Hurricane Center. Several Florida State grads have gone on from the Hurricane Center to lead NOAA and the National Weather Service. So I've had a very long lineage of Florida State grads that have done very good things in hurricane forecasting. So I certainly come from a great school that kind of prepared me for this. I'm very excited to say this. I am dual certified by the American Meteorological Society and the National Weather Association. Spectrum News 13 is the only the only weather team in the country, in the nation, that has a fully dual certified team. That means every meteorologist on my staff is dual certified by the AMS and the NWA. I just got my certifications literally last month, so me completing it basically made us the only weather team in the country that has that. That is a very, very tough honor. To put that in perspective, about 600 meteorologists nationwide have the AMS seal, about 300 have the NWA seal. So it's very, very, very tough to have somebody that has them both. I have 7 years of broadcast experience. It'll be 8 this October, and I have covered a lot of hurricanes. Hurricanes Harvey, Florence, Dorian, Elsa, Ian, Nicole, obviously, last year as well. So I've done a lot of hurricane forecasting over my time. Before I get kind of started, I want to show you a little behind the scenes of our studio. We've got a very cool studio, but what's coming down the pipeline, if you ever maybe are out and about and you see Spectrum News on somewhere, maybe you're out and about, a lot of restaurants and businesses sometimes put it on, you may see some of this. In the next 6 months, we're getting a brand new studio, and it is going to be beautiful from the mock-ups I've seen. Some amazing stuff, but some little behind the scenes here. That's actually what I see when I'm talking to you guys. This is behind the desk. You can see we've got 3 cameras, a lot of studio lights, a plethora of computers. I cannot tell you how many computers I deal with on a daily basis. So I want to test your knowledge first off. What do you know about hurricanes? First off, how many hurricane categories are there? 5. Okay, good. So you guys know this stuff. So yeah, we've got 5 hurricane categories. 1 and 2 are considered hurricanes, but 3 and above, 3, 4, 5 are considered major. Major hurricane designations just simply mean that you've got a little bit more wind strength to the hurricanes, generally above 111 miles per hour. There has been some discussion within the social media communities over the past several years to adding a category 6. That's not happening. If you ever hear someone say, ooh, we may have a category 6 down the line, I can tell you right now, I've talked to people in the Weather Service, I've talked to people in the Hurricane Center, that is not coming down the pipeline. So don't let someone terrify you, or if you read one of those kind of clickbaity news articles, a category 6 storm, not happening. We're always going to have 5 categories, at least in the near future anyway.
Cat 6 is Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. Cat 6 is Wi-Fi. Tropical storm alerts. So we also have tropical storm watches and warnings. This kind of goes hand in hand with hurricane watches and warnings, which I'll also touch on in just a second. But a watch basically means watch out. Conditions are favorable. One of the best ways I like to put watches and warnings in perspectives is with cupcakes. Who likes cupcakes? Yeah, cupcakes or tacos, whichever you like. A watch is basically, you've got everything you need to make cupcakes. You've got the butter, you've got the flour, you've got the sugar, you've got all the ingredients, but it's not a cupcake yet. All the ingredients are still separate. That's what a watch means, whether it's a tornado watch, a flood watch, a tropical storm watch, or a hurricane watch. The ingredients are there, but it's not happening yet. When a watch goes up in your area, whether it's a tropical storm watch, which means winds generally below 73 miles per hour are expected for your area within the next 2 days, that's when you want to really begin to activate your hurricane plan. When a warning goes into effect, that means that those winds are expected in the next day and a half. You need to wrap up those plans because all of those ingredients for the cupcake are being baked right now, and you're about to have a cupcake. That means you're about to have the storm, you're about to have a tornado, you're about to have a flood, depending on what type of warning it is. So treat it that way. A watch means you have the ingredients. Start watching out, figuring out your emergency plan. A warning is when you're going to activate that plan. Hand in hand is the hurricane watch and warning. It is the same thing. It just means you're likely to have hurricane force winds. That means winds above 74 miles per hour. If it's a Cat 5 hurricane or a Cat 1 hurricane, there is no major hurricane watch, major hurricane warning. It's all the same. It just means hurricane force winds are expected. So, the big question that I've been asked in all of my talks this year, what does this season hold? And this season has already been quite interesting. So far, we have already had 4 storms, but 3 of them were named. And I'll get into why we have 4 storms, but 3 of them were named in just a second. It's a weird coincidence. On average, we have 14 named storms in a year. 7 of those 14 would be hurricanes, and on average, 3 of those 7 hurricanes would be major above Category 3 strength. NOAA forecasts a very wide range this year, between 12 and 17 named storms. Colorado State just issued or reissued their forecast, 1 week ago. They reissued this past Thursday, so a little less than a week. And they've upped their numbers again. From their initial forecast in April, which was 13 named storms, that was their initial forecast in April. It is now estimated 18 named storms, 9 hurricanes, 4 major, and you're saying, wow, that's a big jump from 13 to 18. What has changed? Well, there's a larger degree of uncertainty this year. One of the big reasons is something you heard earlier, El Nino. El Nino is happening now, and we'll dive into what El Nino is in a second, but generally El Nino will likely, once it develops, tear systems apart in the Atlantic. It increases wind shear, it tends to really reduce Atlantic activity. But at the same time, we're also noticing much hotter temperatures in the Atlantic. So the question this year is, even with El Nino forming, even though we expect higher amounts of wind shear, could the warmer ocean waters still win out and lead to an above average season, even though historically El Nino years provide less storms? So that's one of the big uncertainties this year. In fact, when we look at our ENSO state, which is the El Nino Southern Oscillation, it allows us to forecast, is it going to be an El Nino year, a La Nina year, or a neutral year, basically in between both. And you see these red bars going above 90%. We know El Nino is happening. It has officially been declared by the Climate Prediction Center, and it's likely to last through this upcoming winter, even into next year. So we know that El Nino is going to develop, which will likely increase the wind shear. So how does that happen? Well, El Nino is a warming of the eastern Pacific waters, specifically near the equator, in an area we like to call ENSO 3.4. You don't need to know where that is. It doesn't matter. You guys don't need to worry about it. I need to worry about that. But when the waters warm above a certain degree mark in this specific region of the equator, we typically begin to see rising air. Why is that? Well, warm air rises. So when you warm up the ocean waters, you're going to enhance rising air. Well, what goes up must come down. So as that air rises, the jet stream will carry that enhanced rising air, it follows it into the Atlantic, and it comes down. And as you push down air in the Atlantic, you increase the wind shear. That's just a general property of physics with this type of a setup. As that sinking air rushes in, you get the stronger shear. If you have a storm there, it's going to tear it apart. So that's the general concept of El Nino. And why, when we say it's going to be an El Nino year, people say, well, that's good. The Atlantic will generally be quiet. But it doesn't act as an end-all be-all. Look at some of the big name storms that we've had in notable El Nino years since 2000. Hurricane Francis in 2004, Jeanne in 2004, Charlie in 2004, Michael more recently in 2018. So we have had big hurricanes in El Nino years. So don't take El Nino and just say, well, it's good. We don't need to worry about it this year, because it only takes one storm. And that's the one thing I want you guys to take away from this. Also, I've done a little liberty of mapping out hurricanes, major hurricanes specifically, based on the ENSO years since 1980. And El Nino typically does reduce major hurricanes. Generally, those red bars you see, which are El Nino years, are generally 2 or 1 or 0. So basically very low on the major hurricane scale. Look at 2004. That was the year of Charlie and Jeanne and Francis. We had 6. So again, it only takes 1 year to really make it a bad year. It only takes one storm in your area to make it a bad year. So what about the other hand? Okay, we're talking about one of the inhibiting factors, right? El Nino, wind shear. But on the other hand is how warm the Atlantic is. I took this image literally today from work. So this is an image of the water temperature anomalies. And that's basically saying, if we look at the water of the Atlantic and say it is where it should be this time of the year, absolutely not warmer, not colder. Now I want to plot where it's warmer than average. All that red is where the Atlantic is warmer than average. And the darker the red, the higher the anomaly. You can see the Atlantic is hot, especially in the main development region, which is this part right here off of the coast of Africa. That's where we get some of the big storms every August, September, and October. Plus, I want to draw your attention a little closer to home, unfortunately. Caribbean, the Florida Keys, and the Northern Gulf, largely untouched this season. We haven't had one tropical depression, not one storm in the Gulf or the Caribbean. Typically around this time of the year, we at least get a little something. Whether or not it develops is a different thing, but we typically at least get something in the Gulf. We haven't had a single storm in the Gulf of Mexico that has even had an inkling of producing rainfall and eating up some of that temperature. When we take it away from the anomalies and actually look at the water temperature, see all that pink? That is temperatures above 90 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Folks, today, Virginia Key. Who knows where Virginia Key is? No. Virginia Key is one of the first keys when you get into the Florida Keys off of Miami. So I used to work down in West Palm. I used to work with Miami quite a lot, the Florida Keys quite a lot. Virginia Key, when you come off the mainland of Florida and head towards the Florida Keys, Virginia Key is the first key you hit. We have a weather station there, a buoy station, that monitors both atmospheric temperatures as well as ocean temperatures. Today, we registered a temperature of 97 degrees
In the water.
In the water.
That is 6 degrees above average. And that is, I had to check with the Hurricane Center too. I said, is this bad data? And they said, no, that is accurate. 97 degrees. It is hot off of Florida. So when we say that, yeah, NOAA issued a forecast this year of 12 to 18 named storms, now you see why we have such a range. We've got the El Nino, which should shear the storms, but we also have the warm water temperatures. So you have a question?
Zach, most people in here don't know what NOAA is. You ought to explain that.
NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA is the head of the National Weather Service, the Hurricane Center, the Storm Prediction Center. Anything that runs weather lies under NOAA. So when I talk about NOAA or the Hurricane Center or the Weather Service, it's all under the same umbrella of NOAA, which is run under the Commerce Department by the national, by our government. So NOAA is the head of all government. They're the ones that help issue the tornado watches, the hurricane watches and warnings. When you hear of a watch or warning or an advisory, they're the ones that are issuing.
That's a federal agency, right?
It is a federal agency under the Department of Commerce. Yeah. So very, very hot right now in the Atlantic Basin. When we look at how hot that water extends deep-wise, see all that red? That is an area of not only exceptionally hot water, but exceptionally hot and deep water. When we talk about tropical fuel, if a storm is going over some warm water, the deeper that warm water is, the more it's going to have to feed off and intensify. And when we start seeing oranges and reds, that means we have a lot of tropical fuel. So if a storm were to go over this, it would likely be able to intensify rather quickly. So again, a couple of key factors here. We've got the El Nino, which will likely weaken storms, but could those water temperatures and could the depth of this very hot water overcome the wind shear? And that's the big question for meteorologists this year. I will tell you, I've talked to hurricane specialists, tropical specialists that have done this 30, 40 years, and they have said that even they don't know exactly what's going to happen this year, because this is such a weird kind of anomaly when we go back in the history books of past hurricane seasons. So it's definitely something that's interesting. Now, when we do go back in the books and we look at past hurricane seasons and we try to pick out factors that we can identify and say, okay, well, was this here in previous years? Some of the years that stick out include El Nino years like 1969, where we really didn't have a lot of storms. But then you see 2004, where, okay, it wasn't the most amount of storms we've ever had, but Florida got hit by 3 of them. Back to back to back. Charlie, Francis, Jean. Florida was devastated that year. So again, it comes down to kind of looking at each piece and trying to make a best educated guess. And so that is generally why those numbers have trended up, is a lot of people are kind of hinging their bets on the water, overdoing the hurricane forecast despite increased wind shear. Here are the names this year. We've already had Arlene, we've had Brett, we've had Cindy. If that thing in the central Atlantic that I talked about earlier does develop into a storm or a subtropical storm, it would get the name Dawn. Personally, my favorite name this year, I've been asked this by children that I've talked to before. I don't know. Margot. Margot, that's my favorite name. Margot.
We got one in here.
Oh, we've got a Margot in here? Please don't be a devastating hurricane this year, okay? Because if so, I'm going to call you out on TV. I'm sorry. I'm going to say I met Margot and oof. So far this year, and I mentioned this before, we have had 3 named storms this year, but we've actually had 4 named storms. And you're saying, okay, but we've gone through 3 names, so how have we had 4? Well, we had Arlene in the Gulf, which was on June 1st, believe it or not. It was right as the start of hurricane season kicked off. Mother Nature said, okay. Brett and Cindy came out of the main development region in June, which is very weird to have storms forming in this area of the Atlantic in June. But they did. Thankfully, didn't impact too much except for portions of the ABC Islands back out through the Lesser Antilles. Then we had that. That was an unnamed system that happened back in January. You guys may remember, some meteorologists at the time were talking about a big nor'easter up in the Northeast. It brought 60-mile-per-hour winds to coastal New York and Massachusetts, a lot of heavy rain, some mountain snows to Vermont and New Hampshire. Well, come to find out, the Hurricane Center decided to go back in May and take a look at that system now that we have all the data. Because in the moment, there's a lot of data happening, a lot of moving pieces and parts that you don't really get all the time to analyze. You've got to go back and analyze systems. So they went back and analyzed it in May and said, you know what? This was a subtropical storm and we missed it. So they've added this storm to our count retroactively. So even though at the time in January it wasn't a subtropical storm, the Hurricane Center did go back and say, actually, we made a mistake, it's a subtropical storm. So it's an unnamed system, but it does go into the count this year. So it's kind of made a lot of meteorologists upset about that because now the names and the numbers don't match.
Did Arlene have any impact with the moisture that's going up in New England?
Now?
Yeah.
No.
It did? Okay.
No. Arlene was back in early June. Literally, I think it was June 1st through June 4th. It did provide some flash flooding to Mississippi, but generally it was a nothing storm overall. So, where do we stand? We're now on, July 11th already? I don't know where the time's going. But historically, we have about 87% of the season still to go. And so, historically, named storms are going to go up. Hurricanes are going to go up. The peak of hurricane season is September 10th. That is historically in our satellite records when the most storms have occurred. So the peak is still to come. We're out of June, but I want to show you where we tend to look so you have this information for future hurricane seasons. In the month of June, we're typically looking closer to home, the Gulf of Mexico off the southeast coast. Why? We typically still have fronts hitting Florida that time of the year. How many have lived in Florida for so many years, right? A lot of people. How many are new to Florida? Okay. So, in the summer, Floridians know that we tend to lose fronts. We don't get cold fronts during the summer. We get the afternoon storms and that's it. But in the winter and fall and kind of the first half of spring, those fronts can clear Florida. It brings us drier air, some cooler air. In the month of June, we're still kind of in a transition period where every now and then you can get a front that is pushing through Florida. Maybe it stalls out, maybe it washes out, or maybe it stalls off the southeast coastline. Those fronts can act as little focal points for little areas of spin. So during the month of June, we're not really looking at much of the Atlantic. We're watching those kind of stalled out frontal boundaries lingering around the Gulf of Mexico, lingering off the southeast coast and around Florida. So that's typically why we always look in that area. In the month of July, the waters tend to start warming up. And we'll still be watching for maybe an occasional front coming off the eastern seaboard, certainly moving its way out between the northeast coast and the island of Bermuda. Plus, the Gulf of Mexico will begin to warm up as well, and we can begin to see some central areas of spinning out of portions of Panama, lifting their way north. That's called the Central American Gyre. It's a whole thing I'm not going to get into. It's very complicated to explain. But sometimes you can get areas of spin moving out of Central America into the warm waters of the Gulf. So this time of the year, we're going to start watching this area. This year, with how warm the waters are, I'm just going to say that the entire basin's fair game this year. But historically, typically, we would look closer to home. Now in the month of August, that's when the Atlantic really begins to heat up and everything begins to open up. We say goodbye to the African dust rolling off the continent. The moisture is starting to really return to portions of the central and southern tropical Atlantic. And certainly on non-El Nino years, the wind shear tends to be less as well. So we'll start to look in the MDR, the main development region. That's where the waves coming off of Africa will now take about a week's journey across the central Atlantic before they reach the Lesser Antilles. That is when we really begin to start entering the peak of hurricane season. And the peak happens in the month of September. September, just about everywhere is fair game. But you can see, we really are watching the main development region. That's going to be your best chance of development. Plus, with how warm the waters can get in the Gulf of Mexico, that's also another area that we can watch, especially for storms maybe rapidly intensifying in the Gulf of Mexico. Speaking of the month of September, really harping on the month of September, 34% of all named storms since 1851 have happened in the month of September. Nearly half of all major hurricanes formed during the month of September. So again, September is the time frame that you really want to keep an eye on hurricane season. October, we begin to start seeing some ideas that maybe cold fronts may begin to return. Sometimes Canada can get a little cold spell that'll push a cold front off, and that'll begin to cool portions of the northern Atlantic. So we'll start saying goodbye to the main development region and maybe portions of the northern Atlantic and watch something we like to call Caribbean cruisers coming out of the Caribbean, still feeding off the very warm waters of the southern Gulf and the Caribbean Sea, eventually back out through the Bahamas. Historically for the state of Florida, and a lot of people don't know this, the peak of hurricane season is September. The peak for Florida, the month that gets the most storms for Florida, is October. October is the month that Florida has been hit since 1851 with the most named systems. So, everybody places emphasis on September, rightfully so. But here in Florida, we also need to extend that into October. A lot of people tend to say, well, September 10th's gone. We can begin to stop worrying about hurricane season. October is still a month we need to watch. By November, waters are certainly cooling. We've got cold fronts coming in. If you get storms, typically those fronts will carry the storms out harmlessly into the open waters of the Atlantic. We may still get a brief Caribbean cruiser lifting out of Central America, moving north following those fronts. But again, November is the month where we really tend to lower those numbers historically. When we talk about the peak months, August 20th through October 10th, nearly half of all named storms happen in that time frame. And over 73% of all major hurricanes happen between August 20th and October 10th. So if there is one time frame where you really need to be tuned in with the tropics and the hurricane forecast, it's going to be that time right there. So the big question is, okay, that's what's happening this year. How do I prepare for it? It's pretty easy. First and foremost, create a written plan. One of the best ways you can do that this, because I have, somewhere in here, some information about what you can do for the written plan. Oh, it's Maureen. It's the page with me and Maureen. So Maureen will tell you all about what to do before a hurricane and what to do during the hurricane. What you can put in your hurricane kit, what you need to grab. I've got all the other fun stuff. I think I've got pets. Do I have pets? No, I've got the checklist. I think Chris has pets. I've got the important checklist, so when a hurricane is threatening, you can go down quickly and say, okay, got that, got that, got that. Ooh, I need to get this. So again, the guide is a great way, on top of creating a written plan, to get prepared for a storm that could be coming down the pipeline. And remember, you can do this today. Every time you go to the grocery store, you don't need to build a hurricane kit the next time you go, but grab 1 or 2 items each time over the course of the next month and a half. And by the time we get to August, late August certainly, you're going to have a hurricane kit put together. So certainly something you can do. Some of the things, remember, water. This is something that I will harp and harp and harp on. 1 gallon per person per day for 3 days. That is a lot of water, you say. I promise you it is not. When you are in a storm system, when the power goes out, when you've lost electricity and water becomes a little bit of an issue, you're going to be happy you have that much water. Remember, you drink it, you need it to bathe sometimes, maybe go to the restroom. We all do it. So water is a necessity in those moments. That is going to be helpful. Non-perishable foods, baby food, pet food, that's always big. Filling your prescriptions and taking out cash from the ATM. Remember, after a storm, a lot of places may be without power for a while. Cash is king. Grab the cash before the storm, and it's going to help you afterwards. Resupply that first aid kit. Go through it. See what you've got. See what you maybe need to refill. A battery-powered LED light and a NOAA radio. Some of you won the NOAA radios today. Some of those radios have lights on them, which is already great. But I promise you, battery-powered LEDs are the way to go. Do not really want to harp on this because I have seen way too many times firsthand in post-storms that I've been in. Do not use candles. Candles have become such a deadly hazard after a storm. Someone doesn't realize their home has a gas leak and they light a candle. Sometimes they light candles, go to bed, and those candles fall over. Candles can become a non-direct hazard for deaths and injuries after hurricane landfalls. Please, 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 if anything you take away from this, go battery powered. Solar battery powered chargers and cables as well. Remember, we live in a tech industry. Everybody has their phones. Everybody has their, radios or whatever that they want to listen to. Solar and battery powered portable chargers are also something you need to have. Know your zone. I will tell you guys don't need to know your zone. You are not in an evacuation zone. But if you have friends or family at the coastline, they need to know their zone. Interior counties do not have evacuation zones, and this is something that is a common misconception. People think that everybody has one. You don't. And the reason why is evacuation zones are meant for storm surge. You're so far inland, if the ocean ever comes this far inland, we've got a much bigger problem. So you don't need to worry about your evacuation zones here. Specifically. But if you are at the coastline or you have somebody at the coastline that you care about, make sure they're aware of storm surge watches and warnings. Again, when a watch goes up, it means life-threatening storm surge. Ocean water is expected to wash up on normally dry ground. And when a warning goes into effect, that means we are fairly certain that's going to happen. And the magnitude can be drastic. Some of the hurricanes that I've covered, including Hurricane Florence, which was only a Category 1, and I hate that phrase, only a Category 1. It was still so drastic, the storm surge went a mile inland, and people that thought they were safe a mile inland had to be rescued by the Coast Guard. So again, if you have friends or family at the coastline or somebody that you care about at the coastline, please make sure they are heeding those storm surge warnings. Those are our evacuation zones: Flagler, Volusia, Brevard County. You may be saying to yourself, well, Zach, you said interior counties don't have evacuation zones, but look at Flagler County. They've got some inland. They have that because they've got a large lake that actually historically drains towards the coast. So we do have one interior portion of Flagler County that has an evacuation zone, but that is strictly because the lake, part of the St. Johns River Basin, flows south and towards the coastline. So who does need to evacuate? Obviously, yes, storm surge evacuation zones, but also high rises in storm surge evacuation zones. If the storm surge comes up and you're in a high rise, you may be trapped there until rescuers can get to you. So we recommend, even if you've got friends or family that are, oh, I'm on the 3rd floor, 4th floor, 5th floor, I'm fine, still get out, because if storm surge does come on, you could be trapped there for several days. Anyone who lives in a mobile homes are not safe in tornadoes. They're certainly not safe in hurricanes. So anyone that lives there. Any structure unsafe from strong winds. That is something that only you can determine. You know your structure, you know your home, you know if you're safe from strong winds or not. So make that decision yourself. Anyone with special medical needs. Remember, when the power goes out, you may have machines, you may have certain medical devices that you need power. Think about that. Is it something that maybe I should evacuate so I can have my medical needs fulfilled and not have to worry about the power going out? And also structures at high risk for inland flooding. Again, you know your home and your property, you know if inland flooding is going to become a threat. You can always reduce that flood threat by properly placing sandbags. If we are expecting a lot of rain, Lake County, all of the local counties, honestly, are going to open up sandbagging locations. We have very good relationships with the EM, emergency managers at Spectrum News, and every single county has told us that they have sandbagging operations and plans to put in place for inland flood events. Remember, you can always take photos and videos inside and outside your home. Very important if you need to file an insurance claim. You've got photo and video proof. Utilize those photos for those claims, and always scan any important documents. Place hard copies in a waterproof, fireproof safe box. If you don't have a safe, here's a tip. Put them in a plastic zipper bag and throw them in your dishwasher. I know that sounds weird, but the dishwasher will actually, typically, if your home were to flood, keep the water from getting inside the dishwasher. It's actually, surprisingly, a very safe and effective way to fireproof and waterproof certain things. Also, flood insurance. Again, you know your home, you know if it's going to flood if you're on flood property, but remember, flood insurance is not included with your homeowner's property insurance. Plus, if you do buy flood insurance, because it is available to everybody, remember it takes a month to fully kick in. So if I'm telling you on your TV, hey, we've got a storm in 5 days heading here, start preparing, and you say, all right, I'm going to buy flood insurance, you're out of luck. So start thinking about that today if you don't have that, and if you feel like you need it. Again, that's a you decision. So how can I get the latest information? Obviously, and I talked about this at the very start, download the Spectrum News app. It's in the App Store, it's on Google Play. You can click the little weather page. We've got hour-by-hour forecast. We've got a 7-day forecast. You can read articles that I write. You can watch me because we've got a little video player that we always post the daily forecast. Plus, again, if you're out and about, maybe you have a friend, a family member that's nearby that does have Spectrum. My entire team, a team of 7, only dual certified team in the nation. We are very, very, very proud about that. Again, we love to bring you the information without the hype. We're going to tell you just the facts, get you through the storm with no hype. That is something we pride ourselves in. If after this entire thing you have not taken anything away, here's the one thing I do want you to take away. When we're talking hurricane forecasts, when you see hurricane forecasts online, on social media, 7 to 10 days out, don't even worry about it. That is us recognizing a pattern. Things are going to change. When we're 4 to 7 days out, we're still watching the trends. It's not time to freak out. So don't let people on social media start freaking you out. I like to talk about this a lot because social media over the past several years has been a great tool to get information out, but there are a lot of social media-ologists, I like to call them, that will try and hype up the forecast and get you to worry. When we're 4 days out, there is still a lot of time for stuff to change, and things will change. So just watch the trends. When you get into that 2 to 4 day period, That's when you can start really honing in on timing and potential impacts. And when you're within 2 days, that's when we're really fine-tuning the details, community by community, county by county. That's when you can actually start implementing that hurricane plan. Ready, set, go is my favorite thing that I utilize on air and online. Remember, the ready stage, have that hurricane plan ready, just review it. That's when you can begin to review it within that 5 to 7 day range. When you get within 5 to 2 days, if you're located in the cone, because the cone goes out 5 days, that's when you may want to start, okay, let me grab the last few items for my hurricane kit. Let me double check I've got everything I need just in case that happens. But once those watches go up within the 2 day period, go. If you're ordered to evacuate, go. Do not, argue with officials. I cannot tell you how many lives I've seen lost in communities that I have covered from people not adhering to evacuation orders. We do this not because we want to inconvenience you. We do this to save your life, plain and simple. Plus, if you're inland, you can shelter from the wind and the rain. So again, ready, set, go. The best timeline that I can give you. Again, look at those days. If you have not taken anything away, if all you've been hearing is Charlie Brown's teacher going wah, wah, wah for the past 30 minutes or whatever, take this and enjoy the rest of the storm season. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys letting me come out. I've got all my social channels here, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm trying that new Threads thing out, so I'm there too if you want. I don't know if it's going to work, but I don't know how I have a job on TV anymore when I've got all these social channels I got to monitor as well. But seriously, thank you guys so much for having me out. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, I'll open them up to questions now.
Thank you, Zach.
West
Yes.
2 News, the lady that gives the weather report, she introduces herself as first warning meteorologist. What's the significance of that?
Branding. That's all it is. It's branding. And I have nothing but love for them over there. I'm very much friends with Eric Burris over there at WESH. The entire WESH team is great to talk to and hang out with, and nothing but love for them. But when you hear first warning, it's nothing but a brand for them. When they brand their weather, that's all it is. It doesn't mean anything certified or any of that.
Are there different meteorologists?
Yeah, there are, and that comes back to the certifications that I was talking about. You've got the Certified Broadcast Met, which is the CBM. That's what my entire team has, the AMS. When you watch TV, whichever channel you may watch, and the cryon or lower third, what has my name, pops up, if they have a little badge or symbol next to their name, it'll say AMS or NWA. That means they're certified by one of those agencies. Again, my team is the only one in the nation that if you turn on, you're going to see 2 next to our name. In fact, we have 2 Mets on our team that are triple certified. They also have their CCM, which is a consulting meteorology certification, so they can do consulting work, insurance claims, stuff like that. They need a meteorologist. But again, that's how you can kind of tell the difference between Mets. Mets also have master's degrees, PhDs, that's other avenues that you can differentiate. But when we're talking certifications, if you look at the cryon, their name, if they have one of those things next to their name, that's how you can tell that they're certified by one of those organizations.
Is it only the Atlantic Ocean where all of this takes place? The Pacific Ocean, it doesn't happen?
No, everything still happens in the Pacific. In fact, today, driving over here, Tropical Depression 3E just formed, and that's likely to become a hurricane down the line in the Pacific. The reason we don't place a lot of emphasis, and we being the nation, more so than just Florida, the reason we as the nation don't place a lot of emphasis on the Pacific is historically the flow in the Pacific is carrying storms away from North and South America. And so those storms historically are going out into the open waters. Now, Yes, California has been hit by storms, the Baja has been hit by storms, Mexico has been hit by storms, and some of that rainfall can move north and really influences the monsoon in the Southwest Pacific area. But the wind and the tornado impact, that landfall impact that we so often deal with along the southeast coast and the Gulf Coast and certainly here in Florida, that is greatly minimized along the U.S. West Coast. The one exception would be Hawaii. Sometimes the Central Atlantic, sometimes storms in the EPAC or Eastern Pacific can, make it all the way to Hawaii. But Hawaii is so small compared to the open, vast waters of the Pacific that it's not as common. So every now and then you'll hear us talk about maybe a storm over there if it's heading towards Hawaii or the Baja. But again, the Atlantic is going to be the basin that if the U.S. were to get direct impacts, you're more likely going to get in the Atlantic. Any other questions?
Does Europe get hit?
They do.
We have a Mediterranean cruise coming up. End of August, first week of September.
A couple of years ago, we had a system in the Mediterranean Sea that exhibited tropical characteristics. Now, Europe does not have a hurricane center because, again, they're mainly landlocked in Europe. So when we went back and reviewed the data after the fact, we did realize that that probably was something of a subtropical in nature system in the Mediterranean. Speaking of the Atlantic, though, you can get systems, and in fact, in 2020, the most storms we've ever had in a single year, 2020, just a few years ago, we had Tropical Storm Alpha form. On the same day, I think we had 3 storms form that day. But Tropical Storm Alpha formed. It was the first storm after we completed the entirety of the name list. And that formed as it was making landfall in Portugal. So again, we don't typically get storms that far north and that far west in the Atlantic, east in the Atlantic. But that year was such a weird year that Portugal literally had a tropical storm making landfall as it was named. Some meteorologists want to say that maybe the Hurricane Center jumped the gun on issuing it and that we're issuing a little too much. But going back and looking at the criteria of what constitutes a tropical system, it met all the criteria. So, yeah, every now and then Europe can get something. All right, well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys coming out, seriously. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much for spending your evening with me.
Thank you, Zach, we appreciate that. One other just note, if you haven't gotten one of the club t-shirts, I do have them over here. They're $20. Even if you don't have the money today, go ahead and pick one up. There's also another hurricane preparedness workshop you may not know of that's going to be in the Claremont Arts and Recreational Center on the 5th of August. I put something on the town crier, and the speakers will be Tom Sorrells with News 6, and then we know about Nathan Gidling, who came out last month to speak to us. So just be mindful of that. It starts at 9:30 and ends at noon in the Claremont Arts and Recreational Center. They just ask you to go online and register, okay? All right, well, that concludes our meeting. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Zach.